Last time we talked about scrapped units from the Terran race, now it's the time to talk about PROTOSS. We had some amazing concepts that, except only one, sadly never made it to the multiplayer. PROTOSS race didn't have that many unique units that were cut completely, as most of them were redesigned either way or another, but here they are. We'll start with this iconic unit from StarCraft Brood War. Reaver is basically a land artillery with a great AoE damage that could be used both in direct combat as well as for drops in the mineral line. It should have been introduced in Wings of Liberty instead of Colossus, but unfortunately we don't know any interesting stats about it. Why was it deleted? Well, unlike Colossus that came as a replacement, Reaver needs more micro and it's also slower. While it might be a fun unit to play with as PROTOSS, it would be annoying to see your army disappear if you just blinked for a second. And besides, we got disruptors with pretty much the same role nowadays. Soul Hunter or Purifier was a ground-ranged unit. The concept was really cool. It rides a hovering platform and has the ability to increase the damage output of his weapon by simply killing other units. It was meant to be the only unit in the game that would actually use that kill count. Soul Hunter was supposedly good against light units such as Marines or Zerlings, and it required a Twilight Council to be built. The problem with this unit was quite obvious. Soul Hunter would become a good all-rounder, capable of dealing with pretty much everything up to the late game. It could attack both ground and air units, and due to its skill mechanic, players would just mass them and try to rush the opponent. And while it was a very good idea, it was probably hard to find a proper balance and make this unit not overpowered, but still useful in the game.
So in this video, you'll see a bunch of replicants going in, copying the siege tanks, and all the marines are killed by the splash damage of the siege tanks. So obviously, this isn't the only use of the replicant. So all those times as the PROTOSS player, when you felt like those ghosts were a little too strong or those infestors were too strong, you now have an option to copy those units and use it against your opponents.
Replicant was one of the most interesting concepts that StarCraft 2 ever had, and since the very first presentation, it was obvious this unit just doesn't fit into the game. Replicants have only one ability, to transform itself into any non-massive units. They're expensive, so cloning a Zergling would not be very cost effective, but transforming into a specialized unit like a Raven, Infestor or Siege Tank could open up interesting strategic options for the PROTOSS. Even though it sounds cool on paper, Replicant would actually influence the game in a very bad way. If your opponent can just clone your best units, why would you even bother building them? Most players avoided using units like siege tanks against replicants and games would become a lot less diverse. So it never made it into Heart of the Swarm, and its model was used for Disruptor instead. The last one has one of the most unique stories in StarCraft 2. The Mothership Core was introduced into the game, only to be removed a couple of years later. However, alongside Infested Terran, it's the only unit that existed and was massively used in multiplayer games. The idea behind that unit was simple. PROTOSS have more expensive units, and losing even a single fight can quickly end in a defeat. Because of that, PROTOSS players were hesitant to go out since it was too risky, and this race was either full all-in or just too campy, waiting for the death ball. Aside from that, PvP was a mess with tons of cheeses and all-ins, and it was very hard to get past two bases. The developers needed to give PROTOSS a new tool to safely expand and play macro games. The Mothership Core was a support caster that could defend the base and help your army fight all across the map. It had three abilities: Mass Recall, Time Warp and Nexus Overcharge. The first ability allowed PROTOSS units to quickly escape and save their lives. Time Warp would just slow down enemy units, and Nexus Overcharge was pretty much a defensive ability to counter cheeses, all-ins and drops. So this way, Mothership Core allowed PROTOSS race to expand safely and have a nice mid-game with lots of opportunities. But the whole concept was very annoying for many players. One unit basically had a very high return on investment, and it was just too good to be in the game.
Cast it into the fire! Destroy it! No.
There were concerns that being able to overcharge the Nexus made it too simple to shut down drops and other forms of harassment. So in Legacy of the Void they made it overcharge pylons instead, but this didn't solve the issue and also made it possible to warp in offensive pylons in your opponent's base and overcharge them. So the Mothership Core was basically removed, the recall ability was moved to the Nexus, and shield batteries were added for PROTOSS defense. So that's it for the PROTOSS race and actually for all scrapped units. Zerg race had no scrap units whatsoever, and all OP units were just simply included in the game. But jokes aside, next time we'll talk about the major redesigns and other interesting things that happened to StarCraft 2. Check out this video about turn units, and have a nice day, see you next time.